As I was saying, there's a slight interruption in this recording because we ran out of battery. But anyway, there was this family, native family, who had this piece of land in Tuaran, beautiful piece of land, by the roadside. There was a young family with many young children, and they wanted to build a house. The husband got a loan from a local finance company to finance the construction of the kampong house. He got the loan, and the loan was secured by a charge over the native title which belonged to them. The house was built and they stayed there. The husband in this family was a principal of a small kampong school. One day, which was around the payday, the day where the teachers are supposed to be paid the salary, he apparently collected the cash to pay the teachers, and he disappeared from the face of the earth. The only thing they found of him was his motorcar that was found at the Royal Sabah Turf Club. That's a place for horse racing. So it was assumed or suggested that he probably tried to bet money on the horses using the teacher's salary, lost everything, and decided to disappear from the face of the earth. So the loan which we got for the house ran into default because he was not around. So there was no money to be deducted from his salary to pay for the loan. So the finance company enforced its rights under the land ordinance to auction off the land. The wife who was staying there with the children was unemployed, and there's no way she could meet the loan repayments. So over a course of time, I applied and successfully obtained the sale of the land by auction. So part of the auction process is you have to get a valuation report for the value of the land, and the valuation of land came up to be something like 80,000, which was slightly more than double what he still owed the finance company. So we proceeded with the auction with the reserve price of 80,000, and the blessing is that this land is such a good location and such a regular shape next to the main road. So at the auction there was a frenzy, and the land was bid, a frenzy of bidding for the land. Eventually the land with the reserve value of 80,000 was sold at in excess of 400,000 ringgit. So obviously the purchase price, as we had gone through earlier, the priority of payments, pay off the annual rent, assessments, then the auction cost, then pay off the liability with the finance company, which was only about 40,000. So at the end of the day, there was still a balance of 350,000. So who's entitled to this money? Under I think it was sub rule 17, which we went through earlier, this was a surplus, and it should go to the charger, the landowner. In this case, the husband who has disappeared from the face of the earth. So the money was being held by me, and what do? The husband was not around. We attempted to publish a notice to look for him, but he never showed up, never turned up. And the people in Tuaran, people in the district office, came to my office in KK and asked, is there any way I can help to make sure that this 350,000 go to the widow, the so-called wife, so that she can actually bring up the children, all these very young children. I said, how can I? We don't know what's happened to the husband. So what we decided to do is the district land office suggested we come under this legislation, Administration of Native and Small Estates Ordinance. By the time, a period of about 3 years have elapsed since the husband disappeared. So they suggested to the wife to apply under this to wind up the estate of the husband and to declare that the husband is dead. Although, as you know, as lawyers, the presumption of death is you've got to elapse 7 years. but things in the district office are a little bit more flexible. May not be entirely right, but probably there's some justice to it because he disappeared. The district office accepted that he was no longer around because he's very famous. His whole story was very famous in the district. And then issued the order to say that the wife is the administrator or waris of the estate of the husband. And this document, this order from the district office is called a jadual tiga. So the wife turned up in my office with a jadual tiga. And this jadual tiga is equivalent to a court order vesting her with authority over the estate of the husband's money. So I could legitimately pay the 350,000 ringgit surplus auction proceeds to her as the sole administratrix of the estate of the husband. So that all comes under the administration of natives and small estate owners. Number 10 is intestate succession ordinance. Number 10, intestate succession ordinance is legislation which actually provides what happens if a person dies without a will. Who does the property go to? So there's a series of circumstances. If the person dies with a wife, it goes to the wife. If the person dies with a wife with children, 1/3 share to the wife, 2/3 among the children in equal shares. If he dies without a wife but with children, then how does it go? If he dies without a wife and without children, who does it go to? Okay, so there's a very serious steps. Okay, so my challenge to all of you students, especially those of you who are musically inclined, is to one day write a song, preferably a rap song, on the intestate succession ordinance. I've issued this challenge for many years, but no one has actually met this challenge yet. Local government ordinance we've already dealt with. City of Kota Kinabalu enactment. The City of Kota Kinabalu enactments, when they converted Kota Kinabalu into a city, it was no longer by way of an instrument by the TYT, which I mentioned to you all earlier. It was by way of an act of the State Assembly. So they passed a legislation. But the functions and the powers of the city mayor of Kota Kinabalu is actually refers back all to the local government ordinance. So for all intents and purposes, the city of Kota Kinabalu and the mayor of the city of Kota Kinabalu, his powers are very, very similar to that of a district officer or municipal president of a other local authority. There's one major difference. For other local authorities like Pinapang, Tawau, Salakan, the minister in charge of the local authority is the Minister of Local Government and Housing. But in the case of the city of Kota Kinabalu, the minister in charge is the chief minister. That is the principal difference. Stamp ordinance, Cap 137. One of the things we retained when we became a state within Malaysia is we retained our own stamp ordinance. But stamp duty is collected. It's not state revenue, it is federal revenue. So eventually in 1989, I think it was 1st of January 1989, the Sabah stamp duty ordinance was repealed and the West Malaysian Stamp Act 1949 was extended to Sabah with effect from 1st January 1989. So our stamp ordinance was repealed. But in the process of repealing, they retained one section of the stamp ordinance, in section 83. So you have to read section 83 of the repealed stamp ordinance of Cap 137. They had to retain section 83 because it relates to a stamping process of certain documents called bills of sale, which is a lending device or instrument peculiar under Sabah law. There's a separate legislation called Bill of Sale ordinance, which is not in your list, but which is specific for Sabah. And the Bill of Sale, which is a document where you can borrow money, is used to evidence of borrowing of money has to be stamped in a specific manner provided by Section 83. Section 83 also provides a process whereby if there's any document, you can, if you want, register any document with the magistrate's court. And what lawyers do now is to register powers of attorney with the magistrate court, although there's no requirement to do so. Section 83 merely says that having registered a document in a magistrate's court, and one day you extract a certified true copy of the document which you registered, that certified true copy is as good as the original for evidentiary purposes. So Section 83 relates purely to an evidentiary provision in relation to documents. So you can register like wills, trust deeds, powers of attorney. Some lawyers think that power of attorney in Sabah is only valid after you register it with the magistrate's court under Section 83. There's no such thing. The registration under 83 is purely evidentiary purpose. Number 15, the wills ordinance. Again, you must note, I think there's at least one question on wills, and it relates to, I think, again, the principles, not so much technical details. You should know the key formalities of making wills. What are the requirements? Has it got to be in writing? The witnesses and can the witnesses benefit from the will? Also, try to remember at what age a person can make a will. In Sabah, the age of majority is 18. But if you read the wills ordinance, the age where you can make a will or make a testamentary disposition of your assets is when you reach the age of 21. So necessarily between the age of 18 to 21, if the person passes away within that age, they will necessarily die intestate. Because although they have attained the age of majority, they have not attained the legal capacity to make a will. Okay? But double check this, I may be wrong, but I think it's still 21. Probate and administration ordinance. Again, you just need to know what's the difference between probate and administration and know the procedure for applying for probate and administration. I think one of the key things you must know here is, again, I think the examiners are not too keen on technical details but more general principles. For instance, if you are granted administration or you are the executor of the estate of a particular deceased, what are the limits of your power? Let's say the person dies and leaves about 5 shops. If you are the executor over those 5 shops, can you rent those shops? If so, what are the limits? Can you sell those shops? What are the limits? I think those are the kind of principles the examiners are looking for. And I think the questions are in that area. Immigration laws. Immigration Act is a very, very long act. You only need to know that portion which is restricted to the residual powers of the Sabah, of the state government, as far as immigration is concerned. You don't need to know the whole act. Just focus on those few sections where the state government still have certain powers. Those are the only thing you need to know. Government Proceedings Act is an act which relates to protection of certain government servants from litigation in the course of the duty. It's a very short litigation, a low legislation. You just have to go through it and see what is the key purpose of the legislation. Contracts Act 1950. The reason why Contracts Act 1950 is inserted in your list, although it's an act which applies throughout Malaysia, is because of Part 10 of the Contracts Act. We want you to look only at Part 10 of the Contracts Act, which relates to contracts of agency. We want you to be aware that when you deal with powers of attorney, which is very, very common in conveyancing practice in Sabah, you're actually working in an area of law known as a contract of agency. The extent of the powers of a contract of agency, the requirements for consideration, whether it can be terminated and how it can be terminated, or when does a power attorney lapse, is all provided under Part 10 of the Contracts Act. So you only need to look at Part 10 of the Contracts Act. Real Property Gains Tax Act, just you need to know what's the purpose of this act. Basically, it relates to revenue derived from the government from capital gains. You buy a piece of property for 100,000, you sell it for 500,000, you make a gain of 400,000, you're subject to tax on the gains of 400,000. So you just need to know that those principles, and maybe you just need to know the schedule. I can't remember the schedule 2 or schedule 3. It stipulates the rates of tax, the rates for taxes for individuals as well as body corporates. You just need to know that those things exist. Civil Law Act 1956. Civil Law Act is again of universal application throughout Malaysia. But we want you to look particularly at section 4, subsection 3 of the Civil Law Act, which relates to assignments. Because in your day-to-day practice, you're dealing with lots of assignment of properties in sub-sales, and then when you deal with banking work, you deal with a loan agreement, come deed of assignment. These are all assignments. And section 4, subsection 3 deals with the assignments, or how assignments are created and how you need to give notice, and the effect of assignment, and whether what happens if you don't give notice. Stamp Act, number 22, Stamp Act. Stamp Act is, I think, this is just to remind you that the key point here, Stamp Act is an act relating to government revenue. Stamp duty is paid to the federal government. State has no share in it. Okay, it goes to the federal government. Stamp duty is payable on any instrument. It's a tax on instrument. So like a sale purchase agreement is an instrument, stamp duty is payable as a tax on the instrument. Once the tax is paid, the duty is settled, there's no more issue. Okay? What happens if the document is not stamped? Is it receivable in evidence? Or what can be done if a document is brought to one, you want to submit or exhibit an instrument or an agreement in a court case, and you find that it's not stamped? What do you do? Okay, I think those are the key issues you need to find out for the purpose of the exam. I think there's a question on that. Number 23 is an advocate's honored Sabah. If you intend to be an advocate in Sabah, you should know what's stated inside. The reason this was included is because our advocate's ordinance was subject to a major overhaul a few years ago, as a result of which the Sabah Law Society became a statutory body rather than an association incorporated under the Societies Act. So now the Sabah Law Society is a statutory body. So you need to know, if you want to be a professional advocate, you should know what's in the legislation which governs you. Lastly, you read under 24 is the Arbitration Act. Arbitration Act, as it suggests, talks about the procedure if you want to bring the matter to arbitration. Just try to know the distinction between some of the key procedures between an action you bring to court and action you bring to arbitration. I think again, any question we're looking at general principles, not at technical details. Okay, so I've gone through the entire list very, very quickly. As I said, it is only scratching the surface. Having gone through the lecture, or any time you have any questions, you can ask the questions on the day of the lecture, which the organizers will pull me in online, and I will do my best to answer the questions for you. So, just one or two final points. Probably more than 50% of the objective questions which you will face in part 1 are set by me. Okay, and we recycle the questions. That is why you're not allowed to take the question papers back home, because we actually use back the questions year by year. We've got a pool of questions which we use for every exam. Bear in mind, our objective is to make you familiar with local laws. Our objective is not to trick you. So there are no trick questions. The questions are not tricky. The questions are factual. So you look at it, if it says what you think it is, and you understand the law as it is, that's probably the right answer already. Don't try to think there's a trick question you could be trying to get me to think like this or think like that. No, that's not the intention, that's not the objective. Okay? So, I'm so sorry that I have to present this lecture in this manner, but these are strange times because of the pandemic. I have to lecture in this way. I would have preferred to lecture you all in person. One final word of advice to you is for you to remember that as far as Sabah is concerned, despite all the problems we've been having recently, there's still scope for you to practice and to practice successfully. But in order to do so, you have to build up your reputation. You may have to suffer the initial few years while you build up your reputation. If you be strict on the ethics and the way you practice, your reputation will improve and will be well known very fast. And take it from me, as I've been practicing for over close to 40 years before I was appointed to the judiciary. There's still scope for anyone who's prepared to work hard and open up the legislation when you're faced with any question or when you're doing anything, to try to not just do it because you're following a precedent, but to understand why you're doing it within the perspective of the legislation. That will make you a far superior lawyer than the lawyer next to you. Before that, thank you very much and good luck to you all.